Hello and welcome. Look at that beautiful Rogers Arena roof. If you're live on YouTube, this is the Canucks Conversation live, delivered by the great folks at DoorDash.
Ding dong.
Promo code CONVODD. That'll get you 25% off and free delivery on your first order with DoorDash. Today's Friday. It's the end of the week. And Fridays with Harman Dayal, brought to you by the great folks at Zephyr Epic. Check them out on ZephyrEpic.com for Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and sports cards. Promo code Hockey Season for $5 off your order and free shipping all throughout Canada. Speaking of, what's the furthest east you've been in Canada, Harm? The furthest east you've ever gone? Because you've been to Montreal. Have you been further than that?
No, I haven't.
Toronto? You've done Toronto.
I've done Toronto, yeah.
But in Canada, because I know you've done New York, so that's further east, I believe, in North America. But Montreal, is that the furthest east?
I'm the worst person to ask about Canadian geography. I legit wasn't really paying attention in socials class.
Mm-hmm. You know, that was my worst class in high school. It was the one that the only time I've been close to like failing a class was socials. I just had no urge to learn it at all. Nothing in socials. Plus I was doing like, cause I was French immersion. So I was doing like social studies in French, like learning about history, geography, everything in French. So that was hard in its own right. Cause my French is not great, but socials was I think I finished one year with like a 57%, and that was the worst mark I ever got.
So for socials and history, I legit, me and my friends found a way to get the old tests from people who were a grade or two ahead of us. So legit, I wouldn't even really study the material. I would just study the exam itself and the questions and the answers to the thing. So that's why I don't really know.
What was your best subject in school, like in high school? And this should be easy for you, a couple years ago. Sort of
honestly, I feel like I did pretty well in most of them, to be honest. I kind of aced most of my classes. I'd say maybe English.
English, really? That was one of my weaker ones, too. I wasn't a big writer.
Ironic, considering you're now a writer.
Yeah, math was by far my best. I was really good at math until like grade 12 when things started to get a little complicated, like simple math. Oh, I'm good at the simple math. Even like throwing it back to like grade 3 when you'd have the multiplication tables. Oh, no one was beating me except for Nam Fam. I brought this up in the past show here. Before we get going, I got to mention. So, you know, I'm a FIFA guy, right? I play FIFA, the video game, at night. Last night, I run into somebody on FIFA, and I'm doing this thing on FIFA right now where it's like a challenge thing. You have to win like 6 games with every nation that's in the World Cup, and then you get this like big reward at the end. And I'm grinding through a lot of the teams, like, and you have to have like 6 players in that team on that squad. So
are these
like,
against bots or
no, online?
Okay,
so you're playing online. Okay. So I'm like, I'm rolling through a lot, and like it's pretty easy to win with like Spain and Germany and these teams with like really good players. And I'm rolling through the Korean team, and it's hard because like they're not very good. They're pretty low rated players, but you have to have 6 of them in your lineup. And last night, I run into somebody on FIFA, and in the game, it's like all you got to do is score first. You just score 1 goal in the game, and you win the game. And I run into someone, and my name on Xbox Live is like Faber or something. I won't say my full username, but it's on there. It's like Faber's in my username, and I get a DM, and it says Canucks Convo ? From the guy that I'm playing on FIFA. And I'm just like, oh, I was like,
did he let you win?
So I'm like, hell yeah. And then right off the kickoff, he kicks it back to his goalie, and he puts it in his own net.
Oh,
run into him again. And he does the exact same thing, and he was just feeding the Canucks Combo wins yesterday. My
MVP.
buddy Bryce and I were loving it, so I got to shout out Tom from the island, an absolute legend, and helping me get some of those much-needed wins on for Korea. Because I'm not the best FIFA player, but Tom came in clutch last night from the island, living it up and giving me some easy wins on FIFA.
What a legend!
No. We're not awarding you those wins. We're not that.
Well, I mean,
you can't be doing that.
Listen, Alex, it's a challenge, right? I'm working on a tough challenge, and
team effort.
And
where's the challenge?
Well, it's a challenge to get the wins in the first place. So I need some boosted, some help here from Tom on the island. I'm giving him a shout out here too.
The goalie was kicking the ball in his own net.
Hey, when you play for like 45 minutes and you pick up 1 win, you'll take anything you can get at this point.
All goals need assists.
It's true. But my buddy Bryce was losing it because he like thinks that, like it's great. We've played teams on FIFA before. I remember playing someone on FIFA and their team name was Bruce. There it is. I'm like, really? Okay, this person like is Canucks fan, and I think you sort of get like the region area too, so you kind of play in the Northwest. So it isn't like the most rare thing, but
It's like he plays an aggressive press, no guys playing back, just all offense.
It's like a 1-5-9 or whatever the formations are. But shout out. I got to give Thomas from the Island a shout out. He said he listens to the show, been listening for years, and appreciated it. And that, listen, I've given him a lot of content, of hockey content. He returns a favor with a couple of FIFA wins. I think that's a good trade. It's a fair trade for me. And I got to mention as well, Harm, before we really dive into the Canucks. So we talked about this in the past. You haven't done a Van cast. You haven't done a Canucks Combo Friday off of a win. This week you got both. You did the Van cast off of a win for the first time, and you're here on Friday coming off of a win. Like, what's your energy level like? How different is it going into a podcast off a win?
Early Christmas. Well, it just gives you something new to talk about, something positive. And I'm raring to go. I'm really excited. I made it out to UBC for practice.
That's right. Let's get started there because it's one of the rare practices where I haven't been to this season. Let's hear from what you saw out there. Tell me, did we see any change to the lines? Was there anything like that, or just same kind of deal today?
Yeah, same lines. So best in the top six with Mikheyev and Pedersen, Kuzmenko, Garland, and Studnicka still at center. Drives rotating in as a secondary piece. Looks like he's still an extra. D pairs looking the same. It seems like they're kind of rolling with the same lineup. Longest practice of the season, I'll say that. I mean, last week, I don't know if you'd mentioned it, there have been some practices which are like 15-20 minutes, but this one was like an hour, and most of the players were on the ice after, still working on drills and their shot and conditioning, whatever. So lengthy practice. Team looked dialed in. There was some good intensity, so setting the tone well ahead of much stiffer competition against the Wild on Saturday.
Studnicka is interesting in the 3C. I'm sure you heard the quote from Bruce Boudreau on the road there talking about him in that role. He didn't sound super jacked up about him putting Studnicka into the spot at 3C. How do you think that situation is going to go moving forward here? I mean, Studnicka is a guy who can play center. I mean, I think he's been primarily a center, specifically when he was in junior, and kind of even as like a still pretty highly touted prospect in the AHL. He was playing center all that time when he was putting up all those numbers. It's an interesting spot to put him in because you're hoping to kind of unlock the offense that maybe a little bit has been unlocked with Dries in that spot. But listen, I keep saying this all the time. He's one of these long players, right? He's got long arms, long reach, right-handed, fits a little bit differently on the line. I also just I don't know. Sometimes I don't really like the look of three right shot guys playing together. Like something just doesn't feel right about it. But you are going to see that in that role. But Bruce Boudreau didn't seem super excited about the move to put Studnicka there. You read anything into that?
Well, I mean, think about it. Going into the season, Boudreau expected that he'd be able to roll Miller, Pedersen, and Horvat down the middle, and he expected that to be one of the biggest strengths of the team. Obviously, the team, as we all know, is much better off with Miller at wing as compared to when he's played center. So there is no sort of the team wasn't built with this scenario in mind, and that's why it's left such a significant hole. I think with Studnicka, it's interesting because on the one hand, he was kind of drafted as a center, and he's a high pedigree guy, so there is some offensive potential there. But I will say, when the trade was initially made, I sort of asked people around the league who were really, really familiar with Studnicka's game, and they figured that at the NHL level, his game would translate much better on the wing than it would at center. So it's going to be interesting to see whether he can actually fit there. I've liked him on the wing in that fourth line role earlier in the season. I've liked his work rate, his energy level. He's won battles, and occasionally there have been offensive, moments of offensive flair, even though I haven't seen him make plays on a consistent enough basis. I do think that he's in a bit more beneficial role than Dries is in terms of a position to succeed, just because Kuzmenko's on that line and he can really excel as a playmaker, right? You've got Kuzmenko, who over the last couple of games, I thought has fit really, really well on that third line in terms of how he can hang on to the puck in the offensive zone off the cycle, how he draws and sucks defenders in, how he protects the puck. Garland's gotten going as a result too, which is huge because when Dries and Garland were playing together, for example, you would have leaned on Garland to really be the play driver on that line, especially when Besser was on that line instead of Kuzmenko. Garland obviously wasn't playing up to his potential as a 5-on-5 playmaker. Now he scored a couple of games ago. I think he's looking a bit more confident as well. I thought against San Jose, quietly one of his better performances, how active he was in that game, almost scored on the back door, drew a penalty. I thought he was energetic in creating turnovers. So I think Studnicka's in a much better position than Dries was just even a week or two ago in terms of an opportunity to succeed because his line mates are really going. And for Studnicka, he doesn't have to be the playmaker on that line. He simply needs to ensure that he's winning his battles. And if he gets a scoring chance in the slot in space, given Kuzmenko and Garland's playmaking, he's just got to make sure he buries those chances.
It's a younger player in that spot too than you are with Dries. I mean, you think that I don't think you're banking on Studnicka developing into your 3C of the future, but maybe he develops into something that you can use moving forward as a fourth line guy when your team starts to get a little bit more depth and, can play 3Cs down the middle that you feel pretty comfortable about. And yeah, I like we talked about a little bit. We like the move. I think it's, Dries has had his opportunities offensively. He clearly gets a lot of opportunities. It's just he's a finisher at the AHL level. Hasn't quite figured out what it was like. What's it going to take for him to be able to be a finisher at the NHL level? So it's not like he's a guy who had to be locked in that 3C spot. Studnicka at least deserves a chance in that spot. And what you said about Kuzmenko is interesting because a lot of people could have looked at the start of his season. A lot of people probably have looked at the start and been like, yeah, but he's playing with Pettersson, right? Like, it's really nice to play with Pettersson if you're in Kuzmenko's spot, but he is doing things on his own, which is very impressive. And it's not like he never was that in the KHL, because in the KHL, he was the guy. He was the guy driving the play at 5-on-5, whether it was creating turnovers or doing things in the offensive zone in his own right. So it's not like this is a new thing to him to be, looked at as kind of a guy who can drive a line. It's just interesting to see that he's been able to do that with this line at the NHL level. So I've been impressed all around with what that trio has kind of looked like so far. And it's not like they're going to blow you out of the water, but again, bottom six matchups, right? Like those three players going up against bottom six other teams, especially the weaker teams, you should be dominating against, like, against the San Jose's, against the Anaheims, the Arizonas. Like, that bottom six line should be just eating every night against other teams' bottom six lines that are at least in the weaker parts of this league when you look at the standings.
For sure. And another thing to mention on the Dries front, and as it pertains to the whole 3C conversation, I'll have to check what the date is of when he got recalled as well. But for him, like, for right now, the Canucks can send him down without Dries requiring waivers. The other thing to kind of keep in mind, and why it's good to kind of get Studnicka some reps and not be as dependent on Dries, is if there's ever a scenario where you get healthy bodies back, like Tanner Pearson or whomever, and you want to send Dries back, you got to make sure that it's a rule. What is it? It's a certain amount of game. I think it's, what is it, 10 games or maybe he's already passed the threshold.
I think he might be. I think it's 30 days or 10 games.
Okay.
It might be 28, but yeah, it's something like that. It's like a month or 10 games.
Okay. I think he might have passed that threshold anyway. I was going to say that it would have been good to, interesting to see if they send him down to, retain the ability to sort of send him down again without requiring waivers. But I think
it'll be interesting because he's on a 2-year deal. Like, right, Dries signed that extension for 2 years. He talked about how much he likes this organization and the opportunity he gets. I'd be curious to see if a team wants to take a swing on him in waivers. I don't think so. I just think that, like, players like Dries, I think teams look around the league and they're like, we could find another guy like that on waivers any day of the week, it feels like. So I wouldn't be too worried about
probably, but he's produced a little here and there. And
that's true. Got some power play time as well. Let's get to something else from practice today before we dive into Canucks at 500. You tweeted out a quote from Bruce Boudreau. You can pull this one up, Alex. Of JT Miller not getting any time in overtime. And Boudreau mentioned that, he was one of the guys that wasn't going that day. And I didn't read it too much. Like, I noticed, like, okay, Miller didn't get a shift there in overtime, but it's not like it surprised me either. I didn't think he had a very good game through and through. And I even, like, think of the quote that he had a few weeks ago, or even just, like, I think it was about a week ago, when he's just like, how he just didn't like overtime, right? Like, he's not a player who needs to be out there in overtime when you have this other depth in the forward group. So it didn't surprise me that much. I think he is a kind of on the edge of being like the 5th, 6th best forward for your team in overtime anyways. Because with him, it's, you're going to win or lose the game with Miller on the ice in overtime. That's just how it feels to me.
Yeah. I'm just surprised it took this long actually for Boudreau to hold Miller accountable, given how often we've kind of seen these, this extreme volatility in his play, especially when you are trying to build a culture where you want guys to play with better defensive habits, to be more responsible from a two-way perspective, to give a more consistent effort. I'm just surprised that it took this long. And I think Boudreaux was right to make that decision for overtime, because kind of like what you mentioned, when JT Miller's on the ice, he's either, like we saw a few games ago in the other San Jose overtime game, he's either going to win you the game where he sent that stretch pass to Kuzmenko for the breakaway,
right,
or he's going to have some sort of brutal back check or giveaway, which hands the game over to the opposition. And given how lackadaisical he was with his puck management against San Jose the other night, it would have been way too risky to have him playing in overtime, especially when Besser and Garland were playing some of some of their better games of the season. And kind of like what you mentioned, I didn't even read into it that much. It didn't register in my mind as like an, oh my God, JT Miller's not playing in overtime, he's being benched sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it just came off as something that was totally logical, and I can't see why JT or anybody else on that team should have a problem with that decision in that moment.
And that's what Boudreaux said. He's been one of his better players for 80-something games, however long Boudreaux's been here. Most nights,
the biggest surprise in that quote was that he was that Boudreaux called Miller their best player.
Yeah, that's
the only surprise in this whole situation.
I mean, he was very good in the end of last season, and when Boudreaux took over, he was great. Like, he was putting a lot of points. Best player, I don't know about that, especially not this season. But let's talk about this season a little bit, because the Canucks now are at 500. They've had a couple days off here away from games. They're going to get back at it tomorrow night. 500 is an interesting thing to see where the Canucks are at up to this point, 27 games into the season. They've got a 12-12-3 record. What has gotten them to 500 after losing their first 7 games of the season? I'm going to get started with having some nice wins in the pro scouting department to get them to this point. I'm going to throw out 4 names, and you can go whichever direction you want to go here. Dakota Joshua, Ethan Bear, Neil Zaman, Ilya Mikheyev. Which one do you kind of want to start with here? Let's say which one is, and you can take context into this of what you have to pay them, what the contract is, or how they were acquired, whether it be a trade or the contract. But which is the biggest win of Mikheyev, Amon, Bear, and Joshua to this point in the season, at least?
To this point, I'd say Mikheyev. Might come as a bit of a surprise, because I think from a value perspective, you could definitely argue Bear or Joshua, but Mikheyev, it just feels like every time the teams needed a third period goal or a spark in a situation where the team doesn't have much life, that he's kind of been the one to give them that.
It really comes out of nowhere with Mikheyev a lot of the time. Yeah.
Right. And think about the moments where he's sort of broken through offensively. Seattle game, which was their first win of the season, at a time where the team was totally spiraling. You think about the San Jose game in late November, where they came from behind in that third period. That third period, by the way, where they were able to tie it and then win in overtime eventually, thanks to Kuzmenko. They were gassed because it was 3 games in 4 nights, second half of a back-to-back. The third period is always what kills you, and that Pettersson line was the only one that was going. It was the only reason that the Canucks got 2 points out of it. Mikheyev and Pettersson came through clutch there. You think about the comeback against Montreal. Obviously, Mikheyev was a huge part of that as well. So it feels like his ability to not only contribute with his speed, with his two-way value, but also now actually being able to bury the puck in the back of the net, which was one of the biggest question marks, was could he deliver enough offense to justify a near $5 million cap hit and justify a permanent top 6 role? I think that's been a huge difference maker, especially the opportune moments where he stepped up.
I'm going to go with Ethan Bear, I think, for mine, because I think Ethan Bear right now, if you're picking defensemen in like a draft of what you want to do in a team for this Canucks squad only, like Bear's my second guy. I'm probably going with him number 2, whether it be cap space value or just in general, second best defenseman on the ice. There was a time in that game, the most recent one against the Sharks, late in the game when they had Ethan Bear playing with Quinn Hughes. And I was thinking in my mind, I was like, is this the best puck moving defenseman that Hughes has had over his career? And listen, I like, you could say that like Chris Tanev at the time was good. It was a calming influence for sure. But I saw how much space Ethan Bear was able to get on the ice when Quinn Hughes was his partner. And I was like, wow, these are really easy breakout passes for Bear in this situation, because he's able to just like do that, make that pass. And I think back to when the Canucks were down a couple of years ago when they were losing, they would play Tyler Myers and Quinn Hughes late in games to try and get a little bit of offense going. And you wouldn't see the consistent, simple passes from Myers, but you're seeing that with Bear. He's also kind of just elevated what the pairing of OEL was at the start of the season when it was just an absolute mess for OEL. He's lifted him out of, at least a little bit of the slump. I think OEL didn't have a great game last game, but it's just Ethan Bear has, like, he's made his mistakes. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he has been, to me, the second best defenseman here. And to know the value that you had to give up to get Bear just being a late round pick, like, you're feeling pretty good about that in the pro scouting department as well, being able to go out and get that player who, it sounded like the way that Jim Rutherford talked about it, it was like months in the making. And I think that was kind of clear that Bear wasn't getting some time on Carolina, but he's come in and really, I think, has been the piece that I've liked for the value that you had to give up to get him. And it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward with him in a contract next year.
Yeah, his impact relative to what it took to acquire him is by far the best out of the four.
Right.
I guess reason I just felt strongly about the Mikheyev impact, but you're absolutely right where Bears.
Well, sorry. So back to what you said about the Mikheyev, I found it interesting you brought up Mikheyev because of his contract, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, to me, he's being worth it right now. And I think that's the thing that is kind of impressive the most here is that a lot of people looked at that contract and we did too. We looked at it and said, wow, it's kind of interesting. The Canucks' big splash in free agency is to go after a winger. That's weird. Like, I don't think that makes sense. And he's come in here and looked the part, helped the penalty kill, but not only the penalty kill, but to me, it's like him helping Pettersson in the defensive zone. I said this earlier in the week. You just don't ever worry about Mikheyev. Like, you don't worry about what he's going to do defensively. And it's kind of almost in the same way of you bringing up the offense there. Like, he's quietly just doing a great job. Like, it's not like he's in the defensive zone. Like, if the other team has the puck, Mikheyev's stealing it every time and he's getting the puck. It's just like, he's just solid in like that defensive way that you don't have to worry about him. And I think that's huge for what we see from some of the other forwards on this team anyways.
Well, he's unique because so many of the Canucks' forwards in the top 9 are one-dimensional. He brings a different attribute with how consistently he wins his battles along the wall, how quietly effective he is on the forecheck, his speed, and the way that he's able to, you know how other teams, when they break the puck out, they dump it in, and against a defenseman like Oliver Ekman-Larsson, OEL won't even have the chance to break it out. Like, you can't even call his retrievals turnovers because he loses the race to the puck in the first place.
Right.
That's what Mikheyev does for the opposition's defenseman, where even when the Canucks don't have an opportunity to break into the offensive zone in a clean way, they don't have a lot of space, they just send a lob into a corner and Mikheyev's first onto it, and boom, you got an offensive zone possession just by virtue of his speed. And I'm thinking about his speed, his two-way value, the ability to win, the battles with the size. I just don't know how many forwards the Canucks have in the top 9 who can provide a similar sort of two-way impact. He's a unique player that the Canucks don't have enough of in terms of the ingredients. And you talk about how permissive the club has been defensively as a whole this season. I'm not saying you need a roster full of Ilya Mikheyevs because he's, from an offensive perspective, he's definitely a complementary piece, but those are the sorts of players that at least help stem the bleeding from a defensive perspective and do back check consistently. And what's funny enough is, despite everything he's brought to the table, I think he can be even more impactful as a two-way play driver. I think we've seen the best of Mikheyev offensively. I still think that there's more to deliver from that two-way element. But yeah, I think he is a unique element. And going back to what you mentioned with Bear, he's just by far their most dynamic right-handed defenseman. He's kind of brought the impact that you wanted out of Tyler Myers, with Myers kind of unfortunately regressing to his 2021 season form where the consistency isn't there. There are too many defensive mistakes. You can't really rely on him to defend the rush and have any sense of and trust and safety in that. So he's been massive. I kind of cringe to think where OEL might be without him. He's really done an important job stabilizing, because now OEL doesn't have to worry as much about defensive zone retrievals and breakouts and the dynamic parts of his own game.
And I think what worked for OEL last year was not having to look at his role on a pairing and think that he's the primary puck mover, always has to move the puck, because he could like trust Myers a little bit and they could both kind of settle into that defensive way. And I think that's what he can do with Bear. Like OEL doesn't have to be the primary puck mover anymore because you can trust Ethan Bear to be that. You can let OEL kind of what I hope he does if there's any way to, milk some of these years out and have this contract not be the worst possible thing ever happened to the Canucks, is like him to just learn how to be a defensive defenseman and make that Edler adjustment that we kind of saw through his career as he gets older. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but like at least that's some way to justify the $7 million not just being a complete destruction to what your team is on the ice. But like something else too with Mikheyev, I find it so interesting that listen, he's fast as hell. We know that Mikheyev is fast, but he doesn't waste strides because I feel like his lanes are so smart. Like he does a really good, and that works so well with Pettersson, where it's like, okay, I know where Mikheyev is here. I know where he's going to be in 3 strides. I can get him the puck in that spot. And that's what's really helping, whether it be like in the neutral zone or in the offensive zone. I think that really is some part of his game that, like, yeah, he's fast. He's really fast, but he doesn't waste the strides. Like he knows where to go with smart players. And that's been working out with him so far with Pettersson. Anyway.
That's a really good point you brought up, because there was one play clipped. I think it was, again, the November game where they played San Jose, where Pettersson sent sort of a one of his patented Sedin like bank passes off the end boards. And it's funny how Mikheyev timed that retrieval where he barely expended any energy. He waited until the right moment when Pettersson let the puck go, and then he just took a couple of long strides, not really exerting a ton of effort, leaned in using his size, and then won the puck. And I was like, that was interesting. Smart. Because I liked it because he didn't waste energy. So for the rest of the shift, he still had his legs going. So fully agree there that he's been intelligent using that speed as well.
And that smarts is interesting, making comparable to Connor Garland, who makes more money than Mikheyev. But you brought it up where he's a versatile forward. He also has a good fit with this team, right? Like instead of Garland, who can't seem to find a spot in this lineup that makes sense with him this season, like Mikheyev's been able to find that. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it too, when you look at like cap space value for a team anyways.
The biggest question is, ask yourself, how many Canucks wingers do you trust right now? Again, would you trust right now against Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl? You have to match up tomorrow, round 1 of the playoffs, let's say.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they probably won't play Edmonton in the playoffs just because of, whatever the way the standings shake out. But let's say hypothetically you were playing Edmonton in the playoffs tomorrow. You have to shut down a line with McDavid, Draisaitl, Evander Kane. Top line's loaded up. How many Canucks wingers could you trust from a defensive perspective for that matchup?
It's probably one. Like I was just trying to think of putting a line together in my head, and I'm like, their best bet might be the 4th line, like that Joshua Ahmed, because you're playing Pettersson with, it would be Pettersson and Mikheyev.
Yeah.
But who's the other winger? Like that you're going to trust. You're going to lose that. Like, listen, you're going to lose that battle if you're any team. You can't put a line together that's going to win that battle, but to at least limit them, I can't think of one. You might have a better bet with the 4th line.
Exactly, and that's where again, Mikheyev brings something different. Is kind of just the point that I'm trying to bring up.
Yeah, it's a good spot for him to slide into. Let's get to because I built this amazing graphic for the people on YouTube here. Higher or lower harm. I like throwing these at either you or quads. I don't prepare you for any of this, but I just throw all these higher or lowers at you. And I built this, speaking of FIFA, built some FIFA cards for us there.
What are these? Our pickleball stats?
Yeah, these actually could be our pickleball stats, but see, I don't know why mine's still a little unknown. You've got the 99 rating. You got a good shot,
Sounds
good pace,
right.
Good passing. Your defense, 50, not the best, but mine's worse at 47. I've still got some unknown rates, but speed, agility, power.
Why is my physicality ahead of yours?
Well, I mean, I didn't adjust everything too much.
You need a bump there.
I think you're Lewandowski on this one, the striker there from Bayern. Anyways, I just threw some faces over there. Higher or lower? I like it. The graphic looks great over here on YouTube. And for podcast folks, I put my face on some of these FIFA cards that you get in FIFA. Let's get to higher or lower harm. I'm just going to throw, right. I got a bunch here and we only got about 15 minutes left in the show. So let's just, we only get you here once a week. I'm just going to throw them at you. Elias Pettersson, higher or lower than 90 points by the end of the season?
90?
90.
Higher.
Higher? Okay.
As long as he's healthy, that feels like a slam dunk.
Okay, interesting. So what is he sitting 10th, I think, right now in the NHL?
Yeah, he's on like 100 and low hundreds sort of pace right now.
Do you see it? If he's healthy, 100?
That's the real question mark. I
Right.
thought the higher
Okay.
lower you're going to send me was 100, and that would have me really thinking.
I mean, that would be very good for the Vancouver Canucks. I would love to see it more than anything. I just think that that's a really big step
That's
for a player to
tough.
take, and that step is so tough. Even
That's
if you're
tough
as
on a
good.
bad team too.
Yes,
Which
that's
I mean,
exactly
maybe
true.
the Canucks aren't a bad team, but
At
they're not a
scoring
great
anyways.
team.
Right. I think that's going to be, if he takes that step, that's incredible. I'd love to see it more than anything, especially with this team and the way the season's likely going to kind of play out here. I think that's a huge step to take for a guy who hasn't even been point per game, right? Like,
especially
in
when
his
you
career.
consider that on top of his two-way value.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're
You start to
talking about
really
superstar.
I mean, you get 100 points. There's probably only like maybe 10 players doing that.
It's too bad that the Canucks have been such a tire fire. Otherwise, Pettersson should be drawing national attention right now.
Yeah, that's true. And on top of that, it's not like I don't think he's really got going on the power play yet either.
Oh,
too,
he
right?
hasn't.
Like, especially the shot. But I
Yeah.
also think that, like, aside from the Kuzmenko tap-ins, like, he hasn't really gotten going or gotten kind of those loser points yet. It feels like every point that he's getting is like pretty damn earned for Pettersson up to this point. A lot of 5-on-5 points, obviously, as well. All right, next one, higher or lower? You might have to go. Yeah, you'll be okay with this one. Canucks penalty kill, finishing 25th in the league. Will it be higher than that or lower than that by the end of the season?
What's it at right now?
Right now, the penalty kill is 29th with 68.7%. So they'd have to improve a little bit, but also jump some teams to get to 25th in the league.
That's a good question. I would go lower just because I'm not as sold on the goaltending situation right now.
Yeah, and that's not been great so far this season. Well, save percentage up there of 881.
Even when Demko comes back, I just don't. I don't know if he's going to find his form right away, which was a big part of the penalty kills turnaround last season.
And putting the shooting percentage and the save percentage into account, the team is third in the league right now in shooting percentage, 31st in save percentage. So I think you're going to see a little bit of a balance out there. Like, I don't think the Canucks are going to finish third. I also don't think they'll finish 31st in save percentage. But even going to expected goals, they're not doing a good job defending. At 5-on-5, 30th in the league for expected goals against per 60. Another one here, as we can kind of see the stat up here for people on YouTube. The power play currently sits 6th in the league. Say that 5 times fast. They're clicking at 28.1%. Will the Canucks power play finished 6th in the league, higher or lower?
Higher
this season. So you think they get into the top 5?
I do. I think that the top unit is just so dynamic at this point, and the chemistry that they have, the amount of weapons where there isn't just, if I'm pre-scouting the Canucks penalty kill right now, there are just so many different ways that unit can score.
Right.
I mean, it isn't just the Bo Horvat in the bumper anymore. There's the Kuzmenko backdoor has been working a lot with Pettersson making that pass. Pettersson himself has the one-timer, which he hasn't even, other than the one goal that he hasn't even really been able to unleash that yet.
Yeah.
So
that's what teams are looking at right now. It feels like the way that you're seeing them defend is like the biggest strength. So maybe when teams start to lean off of that, that's when that part gets unlocked.
Yes.
I talked to JT Miller about this a couple weeks ago, and he's like, listen, sometimes it takes a few years of the group to like really figure it out. And we've talked about how much skill there is in that 5-man unit when they go out there. And yeah, you're together for a few years, you can really start to develop something with the power play. And that might be what we're starting to see this season as they continue to add. And then the Kuzmenko thing, like, I saw, what was it, like 9 of his 13 goals or something are just like tip-ins. And it's like, and then some people are like, like even hearing like Shorty on the broadcast the other day, like, I could have scored from there, right? But like, yeah, if you got yourself in that position with the stick there, but Kuzmenko does a smart job of doing that, right? It's not just any player can come in and do that. Otherwise, you'd have Alex Chason still on this team making league minimum playing there. So I think they can get into the top 5 as well. So we got a lot of everybody in the chat here. Corey, Lisa, they say over.
Even recently when they haven't, I think the power play's cooled off a little bit recently, maybe the last few games or so. I mean, they've still been scoring, but like, even my point is, even when they have stretches where they're not converting on power play opportunities, they still look really dangerous. You still think that they're on the cusp of scoring.
Right. Danger. It looks.
They still look. They look dangerous every time they're on the ice. So that to me is just a really positive sign.
A couple more here in the chat I want to get to. Don says JT Miller's shot, you have to take that serious too. Yep, that's one of those points. And Sonny says if we just need a Hughes bomb, or it doesn't even need to be a bomb, but I think if Hughes can figure out just a little way to even have his wrist shot be that spot or work on that slap shot a little bit, that would, you'd have 5 positions that you feel super confident in scoring from.
I really like the point that who brought up the Miller shot?
Don did. Don
brought up a great point because I was going to mention it, but there were so many other threats. That was a big part of it because I talked to JT after the game again, the season opener against Edmonton, where the power play, where we were talking about the special team, the Canucks' special teams were a disaster. They'd been scored on the penalty kill twice. The power play had allowed a shorthanded goal. I talked to him about the power play, and he said that Edmonton did a really good job of forcing Miller wide. And once he was forced wide, he said that he didn't have the threat of his shot. And because of that, the seam pass across was too predictable.
I see. Yeah.
And we've seen that over games is when Miller's able to come off the flank a little bit and he's coming downhill a little bit closer to the middle and teams are, let's say, cheating for the pass across. That's where he can perfectly place a shot and make the goaltender or the PK pay for it that way. So
yeah, wouldn't shock me at all to see Canucks power play in the top 5 this season. All right, next one, Bo Horvat. I feel like I almost put this a little conservative too. 39 goals by the end of the season.
I'll go higher.
Higher? You think he's into the 40s then? That's kind of the point of that.
Yeah, I think. What's he at right now?
20, but he's clicking at 20. Like a 22% shooting percentage. So
of course,
I think,
he's going to regress for sure.
Right.
I'm not expecting, let's say, like a 50 goal campaign, but you need another 20 goals in how many games?
Yeah, another almost 55 games still, I think.
Yeah, it seems really like let's say it's 55 hypothetically. It might not be exactly that. I mean, you'd be asking him to clip at a 29-30 goal pace the rest of the way. Like that seems like
doable.
Especially in a contract year. I don't know what it is. I've been meaning to do a study on this.
Yeah.
Look at the number of players that had massive breakouts in contract years last season when it came to guys like Nazem Kadri all of a sudden became an 87 point in 71 games sort of guy. Philip Forsberg scoring over 40 goals, being over a point per game. There's just something about a contract year and the motivation to get paid. Just
all about the
psychological
money,
aspect.
You should know this, Harman. It's all about the money.
Here comes the money.
I think agents would be interesting to have some quotes from on a story like that.
Yeah.
Quinn Hughes, 73 points on the season.
I'll take the over.
Take the over on that.
Especially the power play clicking the way it is. And as long as the power play keeps going and as long as he continues staying healthy, I think he's got a good shot at it.
Dakota Joshua, 11 goals on the season.
Is that 5 right now?
I think 6 right now.
6 right now? I mean, he only needs 5.
It's clicking good, but I think the process for the way that he's scoring these goals is something that's sustainable.
Yeah.
I'm going over there. I think he'll get 12-ish, 13.
I think 11 might be right bang on with where he finishes.
Well, it's not an option, Harm. Higher or lower?
We'll go higher then.
All right. We got a couple of bigger ones here. Adding draft picks from trades this season. 3. Higher or lower? This season.
Lower.
Lower than 3?
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. Adding prospects of Danila Klimovic's value or higher. All you need to do is add one of those. Do you think they'll be able to add one of those?
Yes.
Higher than Danila Klimovic's value. All right. This is a good one. Playoff series over the next 20 months. 1. Higher or lower?
So this is this season and next?
This season and next
How
season.
many they play in or how many
Just
they win?
one. Just one playoff series to play in.
That they participate in?
Will they make the playoffs in the next
lower
this season, next season? Yeah, I think lower too. I think that's unfortunate. Linus Karlsson, NHL games this season, 6. Higher or lower? Will Karlsson get into some NHL games this year?
Higher.
Higher. I think so too. I think he'll get a run later on.
Part of my bet is predicated on the Canucks at some point falling out of the playoff picture.
And making some moves.
Yeah, I mean, Cole Lind, how many games did Cole Lind get down the stretch in that 2021 season?
Right.
Like 12.
Did he get 12?
Something like that. I mean, okay, maybe not 12, but there were a lot of games where I was like, man, that guy was invisible. One sec. I actually want to look it up.
Yeah,
now.
I'm actually a little curious. I don't think he was in that many games.
He wasn't in that many, but it was a solid chunk. He got 7.
7. Okay.
So
you would have hit the over in the
right?
Carlson situation. Okay, last one, and then we'll move on to a couple other things I want to bring up, especially talk about a little bit about Luke Schenn. Final one, Bo Horvat's next contract, the average annual value, $8.3 million. Higher or lower? I'm going to say higher. I think it's going to be higher than 8.3.
Potentially.
And we're talking, you picked the over on 40 for goals. Contract year, free agency. We heard the Frank Saravalli thing about $9 million from one team. And as Frank said, it only takes one. So $8.3 million, I'm going to take the over. I don't know if I'm taking the over at 9, but I think 8.5 could be legitimate for Horvat.
The over is definitely possible, but I will take the lower.
Take the under, eh?
I will take the under just because I think recency bias is a hell of a drug.
Mm-hmm.
And Horvat's he's in the top 5 in the league for goal scoring right now.
Right.
But I think there's some shooting percentage regression that's going to come along the way.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to hit 40 goals, but for him to be, let's say, an $8.5 million player, I think he's going to have to sustain this type of, top 10 in the league in goal scoring sort of pace. He's probably going to need, if he gets dealt at the trade deadline, a strong playoff run to boost his value, which is definitely possible. But my point is, I still think there's more work to be done. I think it's definitely, if I was a betting man right now, I think he clears 8, but over 8.3, that's around where I'm like, that's might be a little bit too much.
And so
it's not a confident under, though. I'll say that.
This one's got the chat going. Don says he takes a cut to stay captain. Drago says lower if he stays a Canuck. Corey says if he gets 40, he's getting 9. So, I mean, all interesting. I don't know if he takes that much of a cut to stay a Canuck.
I don't.
It's not like the organization has done him.
I mean, they picked JT Miller over him.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really as simple as that. I mean, players want to feel special. Mm-hmm. They want to feel really, really
especially
valued.
when you have a C on your chest.
Exactly.
Right? Like that's that situation.
If I was in Bo's position, there's no way I'm taking a hometown discount after you prioritize JT over me. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that the Canucks did Horvat wrong and it's not a disrespect thing. Mm-hmm. But if I'm in the player's shoes, it's like, okay, you prioritize the other guy, that's fine, but don't expect me now to then take a hometown discount, especially when you aren't in a winning environment.
Yep.
Like, what are you going to do? So who are you? Like, what? That extra few $100,000? Yeah. Like, what? That's going to help fund OEL's retirement fund?
Yeah, no, exactly.
So his retirement package?
Yeah, he better be buying some dinners. Final thing, as we get to the bottom thing on the ticker here, closer to a cup. I wanted to bring up the Ben Hankinson tweet, who the agent for Luke Schenn shared this tweet, and Stéphane Roger, my arch enemy at Canucks Army, wrote about Luke Schenn being, this trade starting for Luke Schenn as a first rounder. And yeah, I mean, listen, if a team is super desperate, maybe this is the type of, depending on how the market goes, it could be possible. I don't think so. I think that a second round pick for Luke Schenn would be like, wow, you cannot say no to that. If I'm the Canucks and anybody comes at you with a second round pick, you do not say no to that. I'd still be fine with a third. If you walk out of here trading Luke Schenn for a third round pick, awesome. If the market goes the way that it went for Tyler Mott and you end up getting a fourth, fine, right? That's fine. That's the way I look at it. Like, it'd be incredible if you got a first. It'd be great if you got a second. It'd be good if you got a third. And I'd be fine if you got a fourth. That's the way that I look at it with Luke Schenn for the trade market here. And a lot of people are saying, listen, leadership, Ben's tweet's a good example of it. Consistent pattern of being a top 4 player, he says. Versatility, play on any pairing, plays low mistake hockey, physical and tough, kills penalties, veteran leadership and winning personality, and a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. Ben, just an agent going to bat for his boy here with the pump up sheet here on Twitter. And shout out to Ben Hankinson for sharing our tweet. But what do you think about the return for Luke Schenn? I know you're not on the first round pick.
Yeah, I mean, it was. Train. I read it needs to start at a first round pick.
Ooh, yeah,
and I was like, I mean, I don't buy that personally. I mean, the examples that Stefan brought up. For example, he brought up Ilya Lyubushkin going for a second round pick. I don't think he Stefan does great work, by the way. This is not me.
Yeah, that's up for debate.
Don't let your personal grudges get into this favor. But no, he does great work. I don't mean to sort of disparage him or whatever.
Go get him, Harm. Get
but
his ass.
I'm just disagreeing here where with the Lyubushkin for a second-round pick or whatever, I don't think he understood that the reason the Leafs paid a second-round pick was because they were dumping $2.5 million of Nick Ritchie's cap hit. The Leafs are always pressed up against a salary cap, and Ritchie was signed that offseason to sort of be a potential top 6 piece. He failed on Matthews' line, and he was kind of useless there. So that draft pick wasn't so much for Lyubushkin. It was more to dump Ritchie's contract, which was $2.5 million, not just for last season, but it was for this season as well. It's basically the equivalent of what the Canucks did with the Dickinson trade.
Yeah.
Where it's not that the Canucks gave up a second-round pick for Riley Stillman. It's like, okay, we wanted to dump Dickinson's salary, and then we also get a defender back.
That trade's almost in a way that I see the Brock Besser deal going down, where you take some money back from somebody else, then you see a second-round pick. It's almost the opposite, right? If the Canucks were to do it with Besser, it's a different look, obviously, because Besser's a valuable player for you, a little bit more valuable, quite a bit more valuable than Dickinson, but to a degree, I understand what you're saying. Like the value, and we talked about this, I think, last week, but the value that changes so much when the cap space is being returned as you're making an upgrade for a player has to come and be balanced by draft picks.
Yeah. So I guess I disagreed with the with the trade comparable used there, and in terms of a potential return. And I think ultimately Luke Schenn, he's a top 4 player on the Canucks. I don't think contenders are going to view him as a top 4 defenseman.
Right.
I think they'd more view him as he's the perfect third pair sort of guy. And as a result, I don't think teams are paying. Like the other example brought up, I think, was Ben Sherratt. Sherratt, or like David Savard even, check the time on ice numbers for those guys. It's way higher. Sherratt was averaging like 22, 23 minutes a night in Montreal. Right. Sherratt that year, before eventually going for a first-round pick to the Panthers, Sherratt was playing top 4 minutes with Shea Weber on a shutdown pair, leading the Canadiens to the Stanley Cup final.
Well, think about
that's not comparable to Schenn. Like Schenn, okay, he's playing, I think, 17 minutes a night. Like, first of all, there's already such a big minutes discrepancy there, but there's a huge difference between playing top 4 minutes on this Canucks team versus on a team that went to the Stanley Cup final. And even in the case of Savard, he was a top 4 defenseman forever in Columbus.
Yeah.
Whereas Schenn, he's had a resurgence recently, but he's a guy that's been through the ringer. He's a guy that's been on waivers. He's a guy that when Tampa won their Stanley Cups, he often was a 7th defenseman. So I just don't think that he has the cachet of a bona fide top 4 defenseman the same way Sherratt and Savard would.
Yeah, he doesn't come into a contending team and upgrade their top 4.
Yes.
Right. And you look at his role with the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2 seasons in regular season play, 63 games with them, average ice time, 11:26. And I think it's not like he's gotten that much better. I think he's found a really good spot here in Vancouver, but he's not going somewhere else to play 18 minutes. Yeah. He's bringing a lot to your locker room, though. I know that.
For sure.
No doubt in that part. Ben's not wrong there.
My hope is that if I'm the Canucks, I can get a second-round pick.
Yep, I think so, too.
I mean, if there are enough teams interested, maybe that's the sort of package you can get, or a third and something else. But I'd be really surprised if they somehow swindled the first-round pick.
Sure. But let it happen. Let Ben keep blowing up the hype here on Luke Schenn. Let's get to our Betway and get out of here. Let's get
Maybe
our Betway.
He constructs a Schenn and Besser proposal. Hankinson working the phones.
Wow. Yeah. Well, his agent's been granted permission to speak to other teams for Besser.
There you go.
Maybe he starts throwing Luke Schenn's name in there. All right. Betway bets. Let's pull it up. Betway here. No Canucks game tonight. So we're rocking with, and honestly, I'll be 100% honest. Sort of mailed it in this week for my Betway bets. Took a very easy way out on this bet today. We got the Boston Bruins winning against the Arizona Coyotes. So not a huge question mark on the
what
the
a
bets
hot
today.
take favorite.
No, I know it's a very easy one today. So I went with that. And maybe I forgot to put the graphic in here. So you can just you can blow me up here, Alex. I'll pull up the video that I got here because I believe I forgot to put the graphic in. So I'll pull this up for you real quick. This is our bet for the day here quickly. There it is. The Bruins to win in regulation, over 5.5 total goals in this game. You get that at plus 120 over on Betway. And David Pastrnak to get over 4.5 shots on net at 11 or minus 118. So Couple easy bets today. I'm not sure why that thing's. Oh, it's because it's a green screen. It's like blurred out there as well. All right, that's it. Wraps it up. Anything else you want to close out here with, Harm?
No, not really.
Excited for a game tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay. Tomorrow I'm taking off. My first game off tomorrow.
Oh wow, Drancer's not coming tomorrow as well. So gonna be in an emptier press box.
Yeah, I feel like tomorrow is the big Christmas party day for everyone. Like for their workplace. Tomorrow's that day of the month.
Right, that makes sense.
It's the 10th of December. Get it out of the way. Get yourself to the next weekend, and then roll into Christmas. So we're up there. We'll see you next Friday, though. And thanks for coming by for another Friday here. We'll wrap things up there. For my co-host, Harman Dayal, for our technical producer, Alex Allard, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Canucks Conversation. Wrap it up.
Thanks for listening to Canucks Conversation, delivered by DoorDash. Hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.
How about keep it to a thank you, Jim?